Hello. If you've seen the other podcast with Andy Bissell and Ian Macrae talking about what Light Lines were publishing in the September-October issue about this, you'll also know that if you put three lighting designers together in the same Zoom call, the conversation is going to stray. And one of the things that it strayed to, which shouldn't have come as too much of a surprise because it's one of these things that niggles you like a continual nettle rash, is who ought to be doing lighting design. It's one of those things. Everyone's a lighting designer because maybe no one's a lighting designer. So who ought to be a lighting designer? This is what we said.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bissell. I head up the lighting design group for Cundall.
Hi, I'm Ian Macrae. I'm an independent consultant and I also train on behalf of the LIA and the University of South Wales.
And I'm John Bullock, and I'm a lighting designer, and I'm also the publisher and editor of the Light Review.
Yeah, but what's interesting there, Ian, though, people are doing that. Lighting designers are doing that and have been doing for a long time. I think it's Sainsbury's was the digital lab was the project where we talked about localized lighting. That must be 5 years old now, and we had done it 10 years before that, and I'm sure many other people had done it as well. So who is it who's sticking to 500 lux? Who is it who's obsessed with the 500 lux? And I'll tell you who it is, actually.
Yeah, go on.
It's people who don't know what they're doing, or people who are too scared to step away from 500 lux. And the question I have is, what are those two groups of people even doing, being involved in a subject as complex as lighting, if they don't know what they're doing, or they're too scared to step away and think about the space?
Well, so put yourself at one end here, Andy, and John's somewhere about here.
No, he's not. He's that side.
Oh, he's in that side. Okay.
No, sorry.
But I think we're all shifting towards the professional end who understand the way people experience spaces and trying to do something about it. And I think that leaves this end, which is probably, at the last number I heard was about 80% of lighting design is done by white van man.
Yes. Yeah. And this is an issue, isn't it? Because the confusing thing is that article is in the SLL newsletter. So it's for you and me to be reading that, and it's our wrist that's being slapped because we are obviously doing it so badly.
Yeah.
Whereas it should be in Electrical Contractors Monthly or whatever they've got, because they're the guys who are taking the responsibility. Well, it's not the contractor, I'm finding. It's the wholesaler. It's the wholesaler who's actually doing the looming calculations, and the contractors are just sort of taking whatever they come up with. So they are not fit for purpose.
Yeah, and I'd extend that list. I'd put it into Landscape Weekly and Architecture Weekly, and I would drop it into those documents. And I'll tell you why. I was sat in a conversation. So we've got a check roll on a particular project in London, an office project, and so we're not designers. Someone's already done concept. Somebody else is doing the detail. We're sat client side doing a check roll. And we sat in on a lighting meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the architect they want to get their own way. They want to have some really teeny tiny lights that don't interrupt the clarity of the ceiling, and they want them, 3.5, 4 meters apart. And they want someone to say this satisfies the guide.
That's so 20th century.
And they dumbed the whole thing down. Said, look, why can't we just say 400 lux, 0.7 uniformity everywhere, because our design complies? They're driving this. They've got the authority to drive this. And it's the wrong person driving the subject of lighting. And for 20 years, people are going to sit in that space. Now, gladly, it's not happening. That's not happening, and things are changing. But when did we reach this point that the expertise sits here, but the people making the fundamental decisions are different? They're not the people with the knowledge. And for me, the first note I made when I was taking notes on the article, and then referring back to the previous article, was, are we asking the right question? When we say that people are focusing on horizontal task and therefore we need new metrics and a new methodology, is that actually the right question to be asking? For me, the question should be asking, why is lighting design still undertaken by people who have never practiced it or studied it or qualified in it? Why is there this freedom to just go, I'll have a go? And nobody stops you.
Because
nobody will stop you.
that's
Your
obvious,
business
isn't
will
it?
not stop you. Your insurance company will not stop you. The
But we're all
client will
lighting
not.
designers.
The
Andrew, we're all
client
when I teach, this is one of the first things I do. I say to the class, close your eyes, imagine a space. And the very fact you can close your eyes and imagine a space, and that space is in your brain because of light. You've experienced the whole space because you haven't reached out and touched it. There's no temperature feeling. It's your brain has read the space because of light. So we are all inherently lighting designers. We understand how light flows.
And architects then.
And architects would say, exactly, yeah.
Should we all start being architects? Should we all call ourselves architects?
I can design a building. The problem is whether it stands up. Anyone can design lighting. Whether it looks great is a personal thing. Whether it has a long-term effect on your health and well-being, your eyesight, etc. I mean, the discussions about UV at the moment, we're going to see in 20 years' time because people have retinal damage and colours are fading and so on. There are certain safety issues, emergency, UV, so on, that should absolutely be regulated and kept to professionals. And what you're saying is why can an architect design light in a space? There are some great architects who have designed great lighting in spaces.
Oh, yeah. Can't lump everyone together.
No, you can't. But the problem is lighting generally is not dangerous. Electricians can say, look, if you wire this up wrong, you'll kill someone. Therefore, you have to be qualified. Surgeons can say the same about, cutting people open. Lighting generally, we are supremely developed as a species to accept average lighting. And until we recognize that there's a health benefit and the litigators can get involved, or energy becomes so well controlled that we're going to, but then that won't demand great lighting, that will demand downlights for 500 lux on working plane. If you step back and say, look, are these guys saying, should we change? That yes, they are. Should we change? Absolutely. We fundamentally have it wrong. But Andy, you're right. How do we get to these people who are doing most of the design and say you're not qualified and you shouldn't be doing it because currently they think they're doing the right thing?
Yeah. And I think for me, that's. I know we're here to discuss the document and the proposal, but that is as big, if not a bigger issue. If the SLL or whoever it is wants to take something on, that's the issue to take on. That's the issue to address in my mind. And as a member paying them, a fee, they should be doing that for me. REBA do that for its architects. They will take someone to court if someone calls themselves an architect when they're not an architect. REBA will take that individual to court. And we need to get to that point because I don't think a lot of the issues we're discussing in this ambient lighting would even exist as problems if you had a lighting consultant on every project doing the lighting, or at least steering the direction. The calculations might still be done by somebody else later on, but if from the outset the consultant has set the scene and set the standard and said, this is how we're doing this for this client in this space, I don't think we'd see the problems we're trying to solve here. I think these problems exist because we're not actually operating as a lighting consultancy on all the projects we should do. So I think solve that one first and then come back to this one. And I think just on what you were saying before, you're quite right. Everybody, I hate to say it, everybody's a lighting designer, everybody's an architect, but somebody once said something to me which stuck with me, always has done and always will do. Opinion is not knowledge. We can all have an opinion on the light within a space.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you've understood the space because of knowledge. It's just an opinion, and I think we've got to be really careful. We don't, people don't go, well, I did this at home. Well, good for you. Great. That doesn't make you a lighting designer. I ordered some
LED strips and
I ordered some curved steel and built some decking that cantilevers over a retaining wall. I'm not a structural engineer. I just played it really safe and made sure there was 5 times more weight on that side of the wall than this side of the wall,
Andy, as a mechanical engineer and a qualified one, can I point out you really shouldn't have done that? But equally, Andy, I'm not sure that we have a way of enforcing professionals who understand what they're doing into the market. Because you're saying to clients, I'm not going to allow you to value engineer. I'm not going to allow you to use free design. I'm expecting you to pay more for your building at the very time where we're coming out of a crisis, a financial crisis and then a health crisis, which is going to be a financial crisis again, and say to them, sorry, your building cost is going to go up because you're going to have to use professionals.
Is it, well, two things there. Is it going to go up? Because to do it properly, it usually costs less money. You know, the number of jobs I go to where they're ripping lights out because it was done by someone who did it free, and it has had to be fixed at a later date. So I'm not sure. Up front, it seems as though there's a higher cost. In the long run, I think you're going to see a much lower cost if you use a professional.
And that would be fantastic data to have that out in the marketplace.
I think, but I think it's also
hey, SLL, if you're listening, publish that data.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, you know, it works for architects, it works for structural engineers, it works for acoustic engineers, it works for security consultants. They all get appointed. There's no one out there doing that for free. There's no one out there doing structural engineering for free. The steel fabricators are not doing designs free of charge and taking liability. And they are charging fees. Why is it happening with lighting? Manufacturers, wholesalers, you know, is that the problem we should be addressing? You know, is that where the problem starts from? You know,
if you take the others, if you design a piece of steelwork, you know, if you make I-beams for a living and suddenly you design a building and the building collapses, you're going to get sued. And what you're saying is you're seeing schemes where the lighting that has been value engineered into the space or free designed into space is being removed because it doesn't perform. And I'm assuming it's a quality issue, but people should be taking it out because it doesn't perform for the people in the space as well. And if manufacturers and wholesalers and free designers were paying for that because they got it wrong, yes, then you would see free design disappear fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But isn't that the point, that we are moving into an area where we can see more legislation coming through from a point of view of health and welfare, health and safety executives, because that's what people seem to be pointing at. They're not pointing at lighting standards, they're talking about the HSE requirements. If those things get tightened up, and let's use the Grenfell word, because we're all reading every day about the inquiry and the incredible sort of witness statements and the evidence that's coming through about a bunch of people who just don't seem to know what day of the week it is. That if the SLL want to do anything about lighting design practices, it's not about trying to get the people, those of us who know what we're doing, to change our ways, because actually everything that the ambient lighting method talks about is already in the lighting guides, isn't it? We talk about task lighting, but then we always talk about the envelope.
Kit would take a step back and say, yeah, but the lighting guides are fundamentally wrong in the way that they teach. Well, they don't really teach, but in the way that they put forward the argument about how you measure light, etc.
Well, let me say, he's right and he's wrong, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is nothing wrong with task lighting other than we may have been over-egging the amount of light we need on the task. Yes. And that may be a historical thing.
And the task has also changed. The task position has also changed. Our task position is our face, and this is how it is from now on.
Yeah, except
and
I would make the point, and I think this probably accounts for all three of us, that come 6 o'clock tonight, don't bother turning the lights on and see if you can see your keyboard. Oh,
mine's not lit.
So yeah, the whole thing is that task lighting is still necessary. We might like to review some of the light levels that we're using for task lighting, but the SLL has always said that it's about the entire envelope. It's Indeed. What you see, it's what you respond to, it's what's happening behind you, around you, in front of you, and above you. It may not have been quantified in that way.
Well, they do. I mean, they do task and surround and background.
Reflectances.
But in Illuminance, unfortunately, it's Illuminance. But it's this half-meter task. And that half-meter task can be your sheet of paper, okay? And then it's surround. But what it does is it shows it as a horizontal. And you go, well, it's a meter around that, and it's 3 meters around that. And you go, yeah, but I'm holding it like this. So technically, this is against my screen and my wall.
You need a white globe.
I need a white globe, yeah. And what it doesn't do is, it talks about illuminance, and I go, okay, but I'm looking at a screen, and my screen is giving out luminance, and it depends on my screensaver and my background and my wall. My wall is lit. But it depends on whether I've got a white wall or a black wall, because at the moment it says 3 to 500 lux on the task reading. Okay, we accept that's wrong. It might be down to 20 lux, but you go, okay, 3 to 1 between that and the immediate surround. But if you're doing that in illuminance, what if I have a black surround? I could put 100 lux on a black surround and the luminance is completely different. It's just irrelevant. Illuminance, Kit is absolutely right. Illuminance is the most irrelevant measure that was ever invented. It's the only thing you can do is measure the light onto a surface. It's the reflected light we see. And for goodness sake, how do we come up with a method that respects that and also respects that when I take over the office and decide to paint the wall behind me dark blue because that's my corporate color? And that's where the real issue lies. Illuminance is wrong. Every other method is not flexible enough for people changing the space.
And what I think you've just described there is the single fundamental reason why somebody who is not a true lighting consultant should be anywhere near the lighting. Because when I read the lighting guides, I think they are right. I think they talk about reflectances. They talk about illuminance levels. They talk about this graduation of light. They don't talk about a blanket level light. If you read the text and the theory and the thinking, if you read the 92 pages of words, the guides are correct. They also have these 2 or 3 or 4 pages of numbers where it's not possible to capture 92 pages of immense intelligence and design thought into 4 pages of numbers. And I think the problem is those who are not really interested in lighting and just pretend to be die for the 4 pages of numbers. Those of us who are interested die for the all 96 pages. And if I was designing your office, I would ask you what color your desk is, and I would ask you what color your background is, and I would send you a whole list, and then I would design. I would start by asking you. And unfortunately, when people are just only going to go to the numbers and no one is stopping them from doing that, that's when we've got the problems. And so that brings me back to what you said. I think we're tackling the wrong problem.
So if I want the SLL, again, we're all paying fees to do something. With Andy, I would like them to have a campaign that says we need to start protecting lighting. We need to start to protect lighting design properly.
Yes.
Protect the.
We could have a whole other podcast on that, because there's a few people trying that and not getting very far.
Yeah, I know, because I know.
I mean, and the problem is, actually, we may in the UK from December not have so much of a problem, because in Europe to have this idea of lighting design as a profession, you have to have a lighting design profession that you can talk about, and it has to be policed, and people have to be qualified and prove their qualification, go on, and then you can say lighting designer is a protected status, a bit like an architect is. Doesn't mean you get fantastic lighting designers, it just means they've gone through the process and been certified. Now when we leave Europe, perhaps we can start a campaign for the UK that lighting designer becomes a protected status, but you have to decide what that is and how you measure it and how you police it. And I would always go back to the SIBSI stuff. The SLL is part of SIBSI. If you want to be a chartered engineer, SIBSI membership is horrendously well policed, he says, having just done his 2018 membership criteria thing and been told you need to do more. And I did loads. But if you want to do that, you're going to have to start policing people, and you're going to have to then support them to say, you know, you need to be a professional with this status. Now, try that, because you're going to have to bring on the ILP, you're going to have to bring on the IALD, and we all know these people can't get in a room and agree.
I'll tell you what I would say, and it might prick up the ears of the SLL. I'd pay 5 times what I currently pay. I'd pay 10 times what I currently pay if lighting design, if through themselves and ILP and whoever else wants to be on board, if they can make lighting a profession and a true career. Because, you know, let's face it, at the moment, it's a very risky career. It is who's to say that fees just won't disappear completely if we carry on down the route we're going? If we end up with this bit of Revit software with its 9 acronyms and spreadsheet, you know, none of us are needed. You know,
do you remember? None of you are old enough, but if you remember when I started my career, it was all lumen method by hand, And in fact, they had wholesalers who wouldn't accept computer plots. They'd only accept handwritten calculations. And then a computer came along, and I remember having a discussion with Barry Weil at the time, who said, yeah, but it's not lighting design, it's calculation. Give me a piece of software where you can paint the light levels into it. You know, I want this amount on the wall, I want this amount on the desk, this amount on the face. And it solves it by saying you need these luminaires in these locations, which is not what it does. What it does is you put a luminaire and it tells you what the light does. Now, artificial intelligence will come to a point where you start saying, I want light here, and it works out which luminaire and which, and Revit will do that eventually.
Yes.
You don't have a computer big enough to be able to do it, but it will happen. And so with fees heading towards zero and software being able to do it, all you're going to have to do is come up with a solution of, well, an office. My standard for an office is I want this amount of light there with this surface finish, and I want this type of desk and whatnot. And you, like we find in schools design, Andy, you know, there are solutions to daylight because they've worked out the way to bend the numbers to make money out of it. You'll get that in office design. You'll get it. Poor old John is going to be the only person left because individuals will always have this is my house and it's going to be slightly different.
Yeah, and but I can still read a polar diagram. Thank you very much.
But I think you get those clients, you know, you're talking about house, it's my house. You get clients, this is my space. I want it done right. And I only respect the fact that somebody who knows their subject will get it right. That's what they come to John for. He knows the subject of light and he will get that right for that client. And people who have offices have that same attitude. And I think we just need to be careful we don't start thinking, yeah, a computer can do design. A computer can respond to some inputs and a computer can have a think about it, but it's not going to be as individual as a human listening to another human and interpreting what they say. Because when you listen to a client, sorry, John, when you listen to a client, you're not taking on board their words literally. You're listening to their inflection and thinking, oh, that really, oh, he's excited. He's more excited about that. Spent 5 hours talking about the brand, but actually the pattern he saw on that wrought iron work on the way to when he came out of the tube station, he's really taken by that. Right. How do we bring that together? And you go through that design process and that exercise of sketching and you go back to them and you wow them and they're going, yeah, I never thought of that. Oh, I love that. You know, no computer will replace that. And I know, I think
we'll have this discussion in 20 years and see where we are
when we're retiring. Yeah. Damn that computer. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that if you want to sort of set up an architectural practice and you need RIBA to do that, not everybody in the practice needs to be RIBA qualified,
right.
Do they?
Yep. That's right.
No. I mean, I mean, it's a bit like lighting design. Most practices are led by somebody who knows what they're doing, and they have all sorts of juniors and intermediates, whatever, who are doing all the hard work. Yeah. You know, and it tends to be the lead designer who's coming up with the concept. I want it to look kind of like this, and some raw numbers, you know, the contrast and so on. And then it's a junior who engineers it and does all the drawings. Architects are the same. You have a number of lead architects who are qualified architects and take the risk. And they are controlling the work and policing the work and making sure that their juniors who are normally studying to be architects, so they have some knowledge and are practicing and getting experience. And I love that model. I love the idea that if you want to call yourself an architect, you have to have a qualification and experience.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be great in lighting design?
Isn't that what we want? I mean,
absolutely, yeah.
I think that's where we need to get to, and I think that's why I'd say I'd pay, you know, X times more than I'm paying now if that's the model that SLL ILP supported and insisted on and policed, because the money would then be there to go and police that. And as I said before, you know, if someone calls themselves an architect when they're not, RIBA will go and take them to court and sue them. It's happened. You can find that easily in the press. It's happened numerous times. You haven't got to sue many people having a go at lighting before people cotton on and companies cotton on going, yeah, I shouldn't have let that guy just have a go. We've now been sued. Our name's all over the press. You know, it cuts it out quite quickly if you can catch a few people and take them to court. So I think they should be pursuing that angle. And I think in doing so, is that needed? Is this new methodology needed? And I think that's where I would come from with this more than anything else.
If you've been listening, thank you. Right.
I feel now I should go back and say I'm Ian Macrae, lighting designer. But given Andy's comments, I'm thinking, am I professional enough? Am I qualified?
I think you are.